Katal delivers a powerful and direct punch to Ashtir's face, sending her flying across the village in a violent shockwave that destroyed several buildings in its path. He then calmly turns to Aquas, who is still in a state of shock on the ground, and asks her if she is okay. Aquas looks at him in amazement, and remembers at that moment that this is the mysterious man who defeated Swordmaster Cain with complete ease. From a distance, Ashtir rises from the rubble, her eyes burning with anger and fire, and screams at Katal, calling him an arrogant barbarian, and asks how he dares to interrupt her delicious meal. Katal simply replies as he dusts off his clothes, declaring that Aquas is his friend, and for that simple reason, he will not let her die. Ashtir gets even angrier at his cold response, and tells him that she was planning to keep him alive to be her new toy after she finishes eating the rest. But he replies with amusement and a provocative smile that he has no intention of being anyone's toy. The demoness replies with a wicked smile, saying that he will die here and now then, and she summons her weapon, which takes the form of a massive demonic scythe. Aquas tries to get up with difficulty and asks him to retreat and flee immediately. He tells her that despite his ordinary appearance, he is strong enough to handle her, but she warns him with concern that he cannot defeat a demon with just physical strength. She insists that she is strong enough to fight despite her poor condition, trying to get to her feet. Aquas explains that only divine power is capable of banishing demons from this world and purifying them. She adds that this is a cosmic law that has existed since the dawn of time, and since they are now in the demon's domain, there is no hope for a miracle to save them. Katal contemplates her words seriously for a moment, then notices her weak condition and grave injuries and tells her that she does not look fit to fight at all right now. Aquas replies with determination and resolve that she must fight because she serves the god, and it is her duty to face evil head-on until her last breath. Katal expresses his admiration for her determination and strong faith, but he kindly asks her to leave this fight to him and rest, which puzzles and surprises her. He then smiles broadly and explains that he has always wanted to fight a demon himself to see how strong he is. Ashtir tells him that he doesn't really understand and mocks him, saying that he can't even touch her with his pathetic human strength. Katal challenges her to test the truth of her words. The demoness licks her claws with relish, expressing her desire to see his beautiful eyes twist in pain as she tears him to pieces. She then launches her first attack with all her speed and power, creating a massive vortex of dark energy around her. She then launches from the vortex at lightning speed to attack Katal, which shocks Aquas and makes her fear for his fate. But with complete composure and calm, Katal delivers a powerful and direct punch to her face in the middle of her attack, sending her flying into the air after her head was completely crushed by the force of the blow, leaving Aquas in a state of utter shock and disbelief at what her eyes had seen. Aquas stood frozen in place, her eyes wide in absolute shock, hardly believing the scene she had just witnessed. With his bare fist alone, Katal had shattered the head of a powerful demoness as if it were a rotten fruit, and she began to wonder to herself, in a faint voice filled with terror, whether such a supernatural act was even possible for a human. Meanwhile, from the heart of the horrifying scene, Ashtir's form began to regenerate and reform from a violent vortex of pure dark energy. Katal noted this with a cold smile, remarking that her head grows back even after being completely crushed. The demoness looked at him with eyes glowing with hatred and astonishment, and asked him in a hoarse voice about his true identity, as it was impossible for him to be a mere human. He calmly and simply replied that he was just an ordinary barbarian, a response Ashtir rejected with absolute anger and disdain, considering it an insult to her intelligence. She was overcome with intense confusion. Her demonic senses were completely unable to detect any trace of what is called mysticism emanating from Katal's being, and she concluded with certainty that he was not using aura or any form of magic to enhance his power. Based on this astonishing conclusion, she decided she would have to test and confirm the truth of this incomprehensible physical strength for herself. A wicked smile appeared on her lips as she pounced on Katal with lightning speed, letting out a commanding scream for him to die now, adding with arrogance that his weak human form made fighting him somewhat embarrassing, but there was no choice but to end this absurdity. However, in a breathtaking moment, her smile froze and turned to utter shock when Katal caught her advancing wrist with indescribable ease, as if stopping an angry child. Before she could process what had happened, he delivered a crushing punch directly to her chest, a punch that launched like a cannonball and sent her flying backward through the air as she coughed up dark blood, the pain piercing her demonic body for the first time. She was sent flying through the air at tremendous speed as if she were a tiny insect struck by a hurricane. Then she slammed into the ground with a thunderous impact, creating a small crater from the force of the collision. Trembling and in disbelief that a simple physical punch could carry such destructive power, Katal calmly noted that she had begun to regenerate again. While the demoness at that moment realized a terrifying truth, his punch was not enhanced by aura or magic at all, but was an expression of pure and terrifying physical strength. Catal wondered with genuine curiosity, examining her, about the principle or mechanism that allowed her to regenerate with such speed and efficiency. Without waiting for an answer, he continued his brutal assault, stomping on the ground with such immense force that it created a violent shockwave that cracked the rocks around him. In an unseen blink of an eye, he launched towards her with insane speed, and before she could even lift her regenerating head, he grabbed it with both hands and smashed it into the ground with extreme violence, then followed up his attack with a fierce sidekick that sent her body flying away once again. The tattered and scattered remains of her body gathered on the ground, and dark energy flowed to rebuild and regenerate it once more, piece by piece. While Catal watched the scene with a slight smile and eyes gleaming with interest, he noted that every time her head was destroyed, it reappeared entirely from nothing, and concluded that this was an ability befitting a demon, then wondered aloud if the head was her nucleus or life source. Ashtir found the entire situation absurd and humiliating, and wondered with suppressed anger as she got to her feet if he really thought he could face and overcome her with brute force alone. She then added with biting sarcasm, questioning if this meant she didn't even need to resist his primitive strength at all. As Catal looked at her in confusion, not understanding her intent, the demoness warned him in a tone that suddenly changed and dripped with danger, telling him to listen well, and she once again declared her identity with pride. "I am Ashtir, the demoness of gravity," and challenged him to continue facing her with only his brute force to see his fate. Catal replied with perfect calm, and with simple words that completely shattered her pride, saying that she really didn't seem that impressive to him. These words were a fatal blow to her demonic pride, and she erupted in a massive scream of rage that shook the atmosphere as she prepared to unleash her true attack. Ashtir charged towards Catal in a rush filled with anger and humiliation, her eyes shooting sparks. As she approached, she began to distort the space before her, as dark gravitational energy gathered to form a massive and savage warhammer, black as coal and radiating a visible weight. The demoness swung her heavy weapon and struck Catal with a force capable of crushing a giant boulder, but he simply blocked the horrific blow with his bare hands, and then without hesitation, shattered the hammer formed of solid gravity with a single direct punch, following it with another swift punch to her face that sent Ashtir flying backward once again as her head shattered for the third time. Ashtir stood again as her body rapidly regenerated, her mind sinking into a state of absolute disbelief. She thought about the nature of her power as the demoness of gravity, and how she could concentrate the weight of an entire castle wall into a single blow from her hammer. It was impossible and contrary to all logic that an ordinary barbarian, who hadn't even awakened mysticism in his body, could block such an attack with his bare hands, and even shatter her weapon with such ease. So she screamed at the top of her lungs that this was utterly impossible. With blinding rage, Ashtir gathered an immense amount of dark energy between her hands and unleashed it in a devastating beam, screaming at the barbarian to die this time. Catal did not retreat, but met the attack head-on with a direct punch that pierced the beam, creating a massive explosion of white light from the punch's energy and the demoness's dark energy. Catal's overwhelming power completely annihilated the demoness's energy and collided with it, creating a huge explosion, leaving Aquas wondering in shock and terror what exactly her eyes were witnessing. Aquas remembered what she had read in the ancient texts, that Ashtir was an incredibly powerful demoness who had managed to topple an entire kingdom on her own hundreds of years ago. She was completely stunned that a demoness of this legendary level of power was being overcome and dealt with in such an overwhelming fashion with just the use of bare fists. Catal landed gently on Ashtir's body, which had already begun to regenerate again, and noted that she seemed truly unkillable, concluding that pure physical force, no matter how great, would not be enough to kill her permanently. The demoness smiled a wicked, cunning smile as she heard his conclusion. Suddenly, Ashtir felt an immense and crushing pressure she had never felt before in her long life, a pressure emanating from Catal as he stood over her. She asked him again in a trembling voice, begging to know his true identity, but he calmly repeated his claim that he was just an ordinary barbarian. Ashtir refused to believe this ridiculous lie, but at the same time she found this situation, this terror she was feeling, strangely satisfying and exciting. She told him there was one last thing she wanted to test, and then her entire body transformed into liquid dark energy to escape from under his foot. Catal watched the situation with interest while Aquas felt anxiety rising in her heart. In the sky, that energy gathered to form a great black sphere of dark energy, which began to shatter the surrounding rocks and pull them towards it with immense gravitational force. Ashtir addressed the barbarian from on high, declaring that she would tear him to pieces with all her might, and she gathered her full energy in preparation for launching her final devastating attack. Katal realized in that moment that this was the demoness's true power, and that the situation had become dire indeed. Aquas also realized that brute force alone would not be enough to face this, and that there was a desperate need for divine power to intervene. Ashtir smiled a smile of victory and recited her final incantation, ordering the thorns to fall and kill. Immediately, an endless volley of sharp, dark thorns began to rain down from the sky like black rain. Katal stood in place without moving, then began to wave his arms with fantastical speed, creating a whirlwind of swift blows that formed an impenetrable shield around him, shattering every thorn that approached and protecting himself completely from the attack. Ashtir wondered aloud in a state of complete shock what kind of ferocious beast this Katal was. She was then surprised again when he launched from his spot towards her in the sky at a speed exceeding the speed of sound. In that moment, Aquas seized the opportunity and intervened, reciting in a loud, confident voice another verse from her holy scriptures, declaring that the glorious light had come to devour all that is evil. She focused all her remaining divine power in her prayer, causing a pure and luminous celestial energy to manifest, which formed in the air into a magnificent golden axe, pulsing with holy light, and descended directly into the hand of Katal, who looked at it in awe for a moment, wondering if it was a direct gift from the god. Aquas screamed towards him, panting from exhaustion, that she had gathered all her remaining divinity for him and ordered him to finish the demoness now and without hesitation. Katal gripped his new axe, charged with divine power, feeling a strange resonance with it, and then told the demoness that the fun time was over. He delivered a crushing vertical blow, and the axe's holy energy easily pierced her demonic body. In that moment, Ashtir knew with absolute certainty that she had been defeated. The divine light began to consume her body from the inside and out as she screamed in real and painful agony. And then she fell to the ground like a lifeless corpse, completely defeated. Katal approached her calmly and commented that the fight had been somewhat amusing. Ashtir declared with her last dying breaths in a faint voice that it was a shame to be reverse summoned to hell in such a humiliating way, but it wasn't a complete loss, as she had confirmed for herself the existence of a being like Katal in this world. She asked him for his last name, and he simply replied, Katal. The moment Aquas heard this name, she screamed in utter fear and terror. Ashtir burst into a crazed and broken laugh, and with the last of her strength, she opened an ethereal communication channel that shook the foundations of reality and broadcast a thunderous message to all the inhabitants of hell in their abyssal dimensions, ordering them to carve the name Katal the Barbarian into the core of their collective memory so they would never forget it. Aquas let out a desperate cry, while the demoness ordered her followers to devour her memories after her death and learn everything about this being called Katal. Ashtir laughed her final laugh, declaring that this barbarian now belonged to all of them, as strange and invisible beings began to forcibly enter his consciousness. Katal stood in confusion for a moment, wondering what exactly was happening. In the inner space of his consciousness, the majestic demonic entities appeared as giant cosmic worms before his manifested inner consciousness. With utter simplicity, his consciousness crushed them with ease as if they were nothing. In reality, Katal looked at his physical body and then dismissed the whole affair with a blank and indifferent expression. He asked the dying demoness what she had done, noting that he felt something strange enter his body for a moment. Ashtir was met with a final shock, wondering in terror how the demonic darkness that was supposed to overwhelm his body and soul had no effect on him at all. Without another word, Katal crushed the last remains of the demoness on the ground with his foot and destroyed her completely, while Aquas and Hayes screamed in a state of absolute shock. After the purple mist from the demoness's death dissipated, Katal stretched with a satisfied smile and asked Aquas if the mission was now successfully completed.
Thanks for watching. I'm going to see you next video.